So Mitch, you are a chief sustainability officer
Yes.
at a major company. This is a title that did not exist 10 years ago.
Right.
Fortune 500 companies just didn't have that role. Now it seems like everybody has one, and it's usually not just one role, it's an entire department.
Mm-hmm.
So what has changed in the last 10 years? Is it the executive class? Is it consumer demand? Or is it just the planet's heating up and business leaders finally noticed?
Well, for instance, my title actually changed, think about this, 5-6 years ago, something like the Chief Sustainability Officer. Candidly, I'd been doing it for a long time, since I came over to Fedex Corporation from one of the operating companies. But I think what changed, Dan, what really changed about it was the acknowledgement that the issue was such that you needed the title to be able to marshal the forces in an organization like a major corporation that you have today, modern major corporation, in order to marshal the forces that were necessary to focus on sustainability. Because it's not something that any one individual or any one department can do. So just like you have a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer, chief information officer, it was to be able to focus and to be able to manage that issue accordingly. Former CEO of Dow had a quote, Andrew Liveris had a quote that I've always liked. And he said, it takes a team of dogs to pull the sled, but you got to have a lead dog. And that was and that's the idea for it. And I think that's why you see now this focus on CSOs in major organizations. And it's not just for-profit companies. You see it in cities, you see it in other organizations, municipal organizations and the like, because it allows you to focus those efforts and deal with that, to deal with, frankly, what's a complex issue that we have to deal with.
So fundamentally, you're moving physical items from point A to point B. There's going to be a carbon cost there. But what are some of the things FedEx is doing to sort of reduce its footprint?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, if you think about the fact, FedEx, we have over 680 aircraft, over 200,000 vehicles, over 5,000 facilities around the world, moving 18 million shipments a day. That takes infrastructure, that takes equipment to do so, and as a result, you have emissions. What we did is we long focused on sustainability with respect to the operations and the efforts that we have. But last March, we actually came out and we said that we were going to take our global operations carbon neutral by 2040. Prodigious effort, tremendous work that's involved in that. And then we also said that we would electrify our pickup and delivery fleet globally as well. So that first mile and that last mile delivery that you may get if you're a customer of FedEx, that will be electrified by 2040 as well. And then in FedEx Express, where we own those vehicles, 50% of the acquisitions in 2025 will be electric. In 2030, 100% of those acquisitions will be electric. And what that does is that gets us on a replacement cycle that gets us to 100% penetration by 2040.
So we talked a little bit, intuitively, I was worried that there wouldn't be, the infrastructure wouldn't lend itself. You wouldn't get the same efficiencies that consumers do in moving to electric vehicles. But you're actually you see a lot of potential upsides there.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, first mile and last mile delivery, that pickup and delivery aspect or operation is ideally suited for electric, right? It's centralized vehicles, they're a centralized facility, they go specified routes each and every day. They leave in the morning, they make deliveries, they're picking up throughout the day, they're picking up in the evening, they come back to that facility. Around 9 p.m. at night, 10 p.m. at night, they plug into to the grid. When the grid is most able to handle the capacity, that excess capacity needs, they charge overnight, ready to go the next morning. We've been working with electric vehicles since 2009, 2010, primarily startups. And we're starting to see, or we've seen the inflection point where major manufacturers in the commercial vehicle space are moving into this space. So now is the time to make that. So last year we made that commitment with respect to electric, ideally suited for that operation. And let me say this: it was implicit in what I said. The charging infrastructure, by and large, will be in our facilities where they can charge overnight. So it's not necessarily that public charging infrastructure that's needed for light-duty consumer vehicles and the like.
So the other big thing you've got, obviously you're one of the largest airlines in the country. Air travel is inherently inefficient. We hear talk about fuel-efficient airplanes and alternative fuels. Been hearing about it for a very long time now. why is this ever going to really happen? And if so, what's required to sort of get it over the hill?
Aviation's it's a hard to abate sector. I mean, it's one of the most problematic sectors out there with respect to a zero carbon future. We're trying to bring sustainable aviation fuels to the market. Every other airline is as well. There's an issue of cost, there's an issue of scale. We're also doing, and we've been doing this for many years, we've been doing aircraft modernization program where we're replacing the aircraft with more fuel efficient and more payload capacity aircraft, right? So the intensity, the carbon intensity comes down. And then we've also got what we call a program called Fuel Sense. That's SENSE. It's an operational control program. Over 70 programs to save fuel in that respect. But again, that combined with the sustainable aviation fuel helps contribute to our reduction in emissions. And let me give you a price or a data point. Since 2009 through 2021, our carbon emissions intensity for the enterprise has come down 45%, while volumes have grown at 180%. Now, it's not enough. We've got to do other things as well. So one of the things that we did last year as well is we announced that we were going to help Yale University establish the Yale Center for Natural Carbon Capture. We're giving them $100 million over 5 years to establish this. And the idea is to look for ways to sequester vast amounts of carbon, not only for Fedex, but for the entire aviation industry, about a gigaton a year pre-pandemic. And they're looking at ways to do it through geological processes, biological processes, and also industry specific. So coming to industry, industrial processes to sequester carbon as well. And so the idea here is to, if you'll pardon the metaphor, to hit on all cylinders to try to bring carbon emissions down for initially aviation, but something that will continue year in and year out to sequester carbon for whatever those hard to abate sectors are with respect to carbon sequestration.
I think it's a really good point because there's a lot of focus on being carbon neutral. That's not going to get the job done, right. And we also have to repair the damage that we've done over the last 100 years. Right. So carbon sequestration is one of the ways to do that. Have you heard of any? What are some of the techniques that you are most excited about in terms of the ones you find most promising?
Yeah, I think what Yale's looking at is they're looking at, on the geological side of it, they're looking at the fact that with geologic weathering and stuff like that, if you can accelerate that and let natural processes take over in that respect, you can sequester vast amounts of carbon. They're also looking at photosynthetic activity in plants and flora to increase that capability to pull in CO2, put out oxygen in that scenario. And then I think what's really intriguing about it is it's not just the research, it's that third leg, which is also, okay, how do we develop these industrial processes to do this on vast scales that we've got. I will say this, and you're exactly right, the issue around, we could have gone out and simply bought carbon offsets in the carbon offset market. And that's not what we wanted to do. What we did when we announced that carbon neutral goal, if you think about it, our approach in our operation is what we call reduce, replace, revolutionize. Reduce or eliminate the impacts that you have. Put the right solutions in the right applications, and then find the solutions of tomorrow and start implementing them today. And if you think about that approach, it was to minimize everywhere we could in our operations on emissions. That's why we set that goal for electrifying the pickup and delivery fleet. But it was also to find ways to influence not only in the supply chain, but in the utility grid, the utility sector, for them to bring more renewables into the grid and portfolio. That becomes the fuel, quote unquote fuel, for those electric vehicles. And then ultimately you would neutralize or sequester what was left on the emissions, but not to just simply go out and play in the carbon offset market, because the question is, does that really do anything? Those projects are out there, they're already sequestering carbon or avoiding carbon already, and that's not where we wanted to be.
So is there anything consumers, I'm sure most of the people in this room use FedEx regularly. We're kind of addicted to next day delivery, 2-day delivery. Amazon got us hooked on that. Is there anything that consumers can do to sort of use delivery service and shipping services differently to reduce the footprint?
Well, I think it's a great question, and one of the things you can do, and I think it was illustrated through the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic, we were all at home in the early days of the pandemic, and companies like FedEx and others were, in some ways were where that connective tissue with respect to being able to get goods that you couldn't get otherwise. But I think that the point for a consumer is choice, right? So the fact of it is you use the service that you need for the product that comes, not necessarily using the same service over, for every piece. And so for FedEx, I mean, we've got different companies. I mean, we've got FedEx Express for overnight express delivery. We've got for e-commerce the FedEx Ground side of it, which is just surface transportation. If you're talking about less than truckload, heavy stuff, palletized stuff, that's FedEx Freight and the like. And I think the point being is that you utilize the service that is best suited for it. We've had a carbon calculator out there for a number of years. We're in the process of revamping it to give more visibility to the customers with respect to that. But that's the issue, is to give information to the customer and let them have the choice. If you slow it down, if you slow the movement of goods down, you pull it out of the air network, you put it in the ground network. In some cases, you put it in the intermodal network where it can move by rail. Those things reduce the carbon intensity of the movement of goods with respect to that. And if you live in a city like New York City or a dense urban location, do hold at location, right? So Walmarts, Walgreens, I don't think you have Dollar Generals here, but Dollar General locations or FedEx office locations, you can have that item sent to that location, and you can either, if on a local pickup, pick it up, drive, walk to pick it up as well. Saves that pickup and delivery side of it as well.
And the multiple attempts to deliver something.
A key issue, especially on residential issue, which it eliminates multiple attempts for delivery if somebody's not home. That's where you start to see some of the accretive impacts that with respect to it. It's a great point.
So in researching this interview, I Googled FedEx and sustainability.
Yeah.
The first search result that came up was, is FedEx or UPS more sustainable? That article is almost 8 years old, so it's out of date, but it is still the #1 search result.
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance to answer that question.
Yeah.
And also, is that the site, clearly people are asking that. Consumers are searching for that. Yeah. How important is it for consumers to keep track of this? Who's more sustainable in a sector like shipping?
Well, actually, it came out 12 years ago because I looked. It may have been reposted 8 years ago, 12 years ago. By the way, not long after I took over this job with respect to the FedEx, 12 years is an eternity with respect to companies. Since then, we've made progress on the other aspects of it. We did the carbon neutral goal 2040, which is a very aggressive goal in the industry. I think what you have to do is you have to look at, for instance, the ESG reports or the sustainability reports. That's why we put exhaustive information out there in the reports. My team does that every year. That's why I have the hair color of the hair that it is. So we do that, and I think that's where the results come in. You also see a lot of investment firms now. There's been a large increase in investment agencies or in the investor community with respect to ESG related issues, and they're putting out information each and every year. And CDP, EcoVadis, and other programs like that where you give exhaustive information. So, I've said before that the building blocks for FedEx with respect to this, and it should be for any company, the building blocks for sustainability are performance first, transparency, innovation, and then leadership, and this is on an increasing scale of influence for society. And the fact of it is that you focus foundationally on performance, but you also provide that information. But you also have to be innovating and leading on policy-related issues. And I think when we talked, I said that if you're innovating effectively and well, your competitors have no choice but to follow suit and do so as well if they're going to be sustainable over the long term using the old definition of sustainability. And I think that's sustainability is a team sport. As you heard from the presentation and the discussion before, there are overwhelming challenges for society, and we've got to be working together to figure these things out and solve these problems, because no one organization is going to do it alone. We've got to be able to do it together.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's some great insight, and we'll see if we can change those search results and maybe have a Worth or Techonomy story ranked #1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.